Down on the ground. Now. I didn't do anything. Mom! Mom! They came in like shadows, armed, silent, and merciless. No warning, no warrant, just violence. Two kids dragged out of their home in nothing but underwear, a mother screaming, neighbors frozen in fear, and one man watching his family fall apart in front of his eyes. You won't believe what happens next.
Welcome to TNM Incredible Story. Let's uncover what really happened. It was a mild spring morning in Westwood Glen, the kind of morning where birdsong mingled with the distant murmur of sprinklers and the occasional bark of a dog. The sun filtered softly through a veil of clouds, casting a golden hue on the trimmed lawns and white picket fences that lined the quiet suburban street. It was a neighborhood built on routine, where the same joggers waved at the same mailman, and kids left scooters strewn across driveways without fear. Inside the Romo residence at 2136 Sycamore Lane, the day had begun like any other. Noah, 18, lounged on the living room couch, one leg draped over the armrest, eyes glued to his phone screen as he scrolled through TikToks. He wore nothing but boxers and a threadbare Marines t-shirt that once belonged to his father. Across the room, Liam, only 8, sat cross-legged on a beanbag in front of the television. Enraptured by a rerun of SpongeBob SquarePants, a half-eaten Pop-Tart clutched in his hand. "Bro, I swear this guy's voice is AI," Noah muttered, laughing to himself. But Liam didn't respond. His world, for now, was Bikini Bottom. The kitchen was still warm with the scent of scrambled eggs and toast, a breakfast hastily prepared by Laura before she left. The van keys had jingled as she kissed both boys goodbye, shouting over her shoulder, "Just 20 minutes, okay? Watch your brother." Barry, on the other hand, had already left much earlier. At 7:00 a.m. sharp, he had laced up his boots, zipped up a black hoodie, and hopped into his vintage 1992 Ford Bronco. He always rose with the dawn. Some habits from his military years refused to fade. That morning, he was headed to the nearby Veterans Community Center to deliver a leadership workshop to a group of recently discharged servicemen. It was part of a reintegration program he had helped establish himself. Barry Romo had never been an ordinary man. A former Navy SEAL, he had once led covert operations in Fallujah, Kabul, and Mogadishu. He had seen more blood and betrayal than any man should. His name was once whispered in briefing rooms at Langley and shouted over encrypted radios in the dead of night. He had 3 commendations, 1 Purple Heart, and scars that still itch when the rain came. But now, at 43, Barry wore his legacy like a second skin, always present, but never flaunted. He had transitioned from elite warrior to community mentor, yet the steel in his spine never left him. Every morning still began with a 5K run. Every door and window in the house had been reinforced under his supervision. His sons knew how to perform basic self-defense maneuvers. And Laura sometimes joked that their mailbox had more security than Fort Knox. But none of that would matter. At 9:11 a.m., a black, unmarked SUV rolled slowly down Sycamore Lane. It passed Mrs. Jenkins, who was out front watering her tulips, and Mr. Thompson, who had just started mowing his lawn. Neither noticed the tinted windows, nor the unusual quietness of the vehicle's hum. At 9:17 a.m., it parked half a block down, engine still running. From across the street, Mrs. Jenkins squinted over her garden hose. "That's strange," she murmured. "Don't think I've seen that car before." Inside the Romo house, Liam was now chasing the dog through the hallway, both of them laughing and barking. Noah shouted something about knocking over the lamp, but didn't bother looking up. The world felt normal, untouched. At 9:23 a.m., everything shattered. The doors of the SUV opened with mechanical precision. 8 men stepped out, dressed in full tactical gear, unmarked black helmets, Kevlar vests, and automatic rifles slung low. Their movements were quiet, rehearsed. This was not their first operation. They didn't knock. With a powerful thud, the front door burst open, splinters flying across the entryway. Noah leapt from the couch, heart slamming against his ribs. "What the?" A masked agent shoved him hard against the wall, one knee pressed into his spine. Rifle muzzle grazing the back of his neck. "Don't move," the agent barked. Liam screamed from the hallway. Another agent had scooped him up by the arm. The child thrashed and cried, but it was no use. He was dragged toward the open door, barefoot, wearing only underwear and a Jurassic Park t-shirt. From her window, Mrs. Jenkins dropped her watering can. Mr. Thompson cut the mower's engine and stepped closer to the street, frowning. Laura's van screeched around the corner just in time to see Noah being shoved face-first onto the concrete. His arms wrenched behind his back. Liam was being yanked by 2 agents down the porch steps, his sobs audible from across the lawn. "No. What are you doing? That's my son." Laura screamed as she flung open the door, groceries tumbling to the pavement. 2 agents turned on her, one holding up a hand. "Ma'am, stay back." "No. You can't. Back off." She tried to push past them, but was met with a wall of black armor. A rifle muzzle met her chest, and she froze. Neighbors began to pour out of their houses now, phones in hand, filming, gasping. The peaceful suburban street had turned into a war zone. In the distance, the low rumble of Barry's Bronco was approaching. He would arrive moments later. Stepping out into a nightmare he never imagined, his children on the ground, his wife screaming, and the echo of black boots on concrete forever burned into memory. The sound of tires grinding against loose gravel snapped every gaze toward the driveway. Barry's Bronco came to a screeching halt, its headlights catching the edges of the chaos like a war film frozen in motion. His door slammed open before the engine fully stopped, and his boots hit the pavement with the force of thunder. His brain took in everything in split seconds, a skill honed from years of clearing rooms under gunfire. Noah face down on the concrete, arms twisted behind his back. Liam barefoot and shaking, clutching the arm of one of the masked agents like a drowning child clinging to driftwood. Laura screaming, held back by 2 agents, her knees scraped from falling as she tried to reach her sons. Barry's blood boiled. "Get your goddamn hands off my family," he roared. Immediately, 2 agents turned their weapons toward him. One shouted, "Hands where I can see them. Do it now." Barry froze. But not out of fear. He'd seen this before. This exact formation, the way the perimeter was set up, the way the team moved. These weren't ordinary cops. They weren't local. This was a federal team. Maybe DEA, maybe something darker. He raised his hands slowly but deliberately. "I'm unarmed." "This is my house," Barry said, voice low but clear. His eyes, however, burned with fury. "What the hell is this? We have a sealed warrant." "Step away from the vehicle," an agent snapped, already motioning for another man to check Barry's car. "For what?" Barry growled. "You'll find out soon enough." He could see it now. This wasn't a mistake. This was a takedown. And it wasn't just about him. It was personal. Targeted. Liam was now crying uncontrollably. One of the agents tried to shove him into the SUV, but Laura screamed again, managing to break free long enough to wrap her arms around him. Another agent grabbed her hair and yanked her back. That was the last straw. Barry lunged forward. It was instinct, not choice. A heartbeat later, 3 agents swarmed him, forcing him to the ground. His cheeks slammed against the driveway. Cold steel clicked around his wrists. "You're making a mistake," he barked. "Barry Romo. You are under investigation for suspected trafficking of Schedule 1 narcotics under federal jurisdiction." "What?" Barry's voice cracked in disbelief. He turned his head just enough to see Noah's face, bloody from concrete scrapes, confused and terrified. And Liam, being forced into the black SUV, still screaming for his mother. "You've got the wrong guy," Barry hissed. But deep down, something told him they didn't. From across the street, Mrs. Jenkins had stopped filming, one trembling hand covering her mouth. Mr. Thompson stood frozen with his phone still recording. The entire neighborhood was watching as the Romo family was torn apart. As Barry was hauled upright, he made eye contact with Laura. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes held the same message as his. "We will fight this. Together." The agents shoved Barry into the SUV, right beside his sons. Liam collapsed against his chest, sobbing. Barry didn't speak. He just wrapped his cuffed arms as best he could around his son. Outside, the sirens faded into the distance. But something darker was just beginning. Barry's world tilted violently as the door to the black SUV slammed shut behind him. He could feel the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into his wrists as the vehicle lurched into motion. His sons were in the back seat. Silent but trembling, Noah with his face pressed against the cold window, Liam curled up against Barry's side. Laura, she was gone. Barry's mind raced. The agents had no right to do this. There was no warrant, no clear reason, no explanation. This wasn't a routine bust. This was something far more sinister, and the fear he'd felt earlier had now settled into an ice-cold certainty. They weren't just after him. They were after something bigger. "Where are you taking us?" Barry's voice was steady, but inside, he was boiling with fury. The agent sitting in the front of the SUV didn't answer. Instead, he flicked a glance over his shoulder, his eyes briefly locking with Barry's in a cold, calculated stare. Barry's muscles tensed. Something wasn't right. He'd been in countless operations, seen things that most men couldn't even imagine. But this felt like it was orchestrated from a higher power, someone pulling strings from the shadows. He wasn't just a casualty in a federal case. He was being made an example of. "Do you want to know what this is about?" The agent finally spoke, his voice muffled by the helmet. Barry caught the hint of a smirk on the agent's lips as he spoke, like this was all some game. Barry didn't flinch. He'd been through worse than this. Much worse. "You're looking at a long list of charges, Romo," the agent continued. "Trafficking, illegal arms sales, ties to international criminal organizations. I don't need to tell you who's behind this." The words hung in the air like poison. Barry clenched his jaw. His past was catching up to him faster than he'd ever imagined. But he wouldn't let them take his family, not like this. "What do you want with my family?" Barry's voice was low, controlled. The agent leaned forward in his seat, his face obscured behind the tactical gear. But his eyes, those eyes, were full of smug satisfaction. "Your wife's not the one we're interested in, Mr. Romo. It's you. And we're going to make sure you don't have a chance to fight back." The SUV hit a hard right, sending Barry crashing against the side door. His son, Noah, gasped beside him, his fingers gripping Barry's arm tightly, as if clinging to the only solid thing in a world of confusion and fear. The tension inside the vehicle was suffocating, the oppressive silence making it feel like the walls were closing in. Barry could hear the faint sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his chest, trying to focus on his next move. He had no idea where they were going, but the absence of other cars on the road told him they were heading away from the city, out of sight, into the unknown. His mind flickered back to the days of his service, those first few months when he'd been in the field as a Navy SEAL, tasked with missions that were far more dangerous than anything he'd ever faced in civilian life. His instincts had always been sharp, and right now, every nerve in his body screamed that this was a trap. The questions swirling in his mind were relentless. Why were they framing him for something so grand, so intricate? Why now? Had his past finally come back to haunt him? The thought gnawed at him as the city lights faded into the distance. The SUV's brakes squealed as they slowed to a stop. Barry's body tensed, ready for whatever came next. The agent in front finally spoke again. "You'll find out soon enough." The door swung open, and Barry was shoved out into the dimly lit space. His eyes squinted against the bright lights overhead, a warehouse or some industrial compound stretching out before him. A place he didn't recognize. They led him down a narrow hallway, his footsteps echoing off the walls. His sons were in tow, guarded by 2 more agents. Barry's pulse quickened. This place was too quiet, too sterile. It felt like a holding facility, like they were about to disappear without a trace. The silence was shattered by the sound of a door creaking open. A tall figure in a suit stood in the doorway. His face unreadable, but his presence demanding attention. This wasn't a cop. This wasn't someone from any federal agency Barry recognized. No, this was someone more dangerous. Barry was shoved into the room. The door slammed shut behind him. Well, Barry Romo. Quite the reputation you've built for yourself, huh? The man said, his voice smooth, calculated, dripping with disdain. Barry's fists clenched. The man's demeanor alone made him feel like prey. Barry had spent his life hunting, not being hunted. And this man exuded the kind of power Barry had seen in the darkest corners of international operations. "I don't know who you are, or what you want, but you've made a big mistake," Barry growled. The man laughed, a low, chilling sound. "You think I don't know who you are?" he asked. "You think I don't know everything about you, about your past, your connections, your every move?" Barry stayed silent, waiting for the man to continue. "My name is Simon Ross," he said, stepping closer. "And your reputation, Mr. Romo, has caught the attention of some very powerful people. I'm afraid you've been playing in a league much bigger than you realized." The weight of Ross's words hit Barry like a ton of bricks. It was a warning, but more than that, it was a confession. Ross wasn't just here to arrest him. Ross was here to break him. Barry's pulse thudded in his ears as he stood in front of Simon Ross. The walls of the dimly lit room closed in on him, but he refused to show fear. His mind raced. He had survived worse than this. He had been trained for this exact kind of pressure. But the stakes were higher now. This wasn't just about him. This was about his family. Why are you doing this? Barry's voice was low, calm, but edged with the intensity of a man who had nothing left to lose. Ross smiled, his expression cold, distant. I don't think you understand, Romo, he said, stepping closer, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor. This isn't personal. This is bigger than you or me. This is about power, control, and the people who pull the strings. You're just a cog in a machine you can't even begin to comprehend. Barry's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his posture steady. He couldn't let Ross see how badly this was rattling him. His mind flickered to his sons, Noah, Liam, and Laura. He couldn't lose them. Not like this. Not without a fight. How do you know all this about me? Barry demanded, trying to stay focused. Who sent you? Who are you working for? Ross took a deep breath, as though savoring the moment. You don't need to know that, Barry. What matters is that you're already in too deep. Your connections, your history, it's all a liability. You've crossed lines you didn't even know existed. And now, the people you've been involved with are making sure you pay for it. Barry's mind raced, searching for any clue that could help him make sense of what Ross was saying. Connections. History. Barry knew he'd worked with shady figures in the past. No one with a clean conscience stays in the game as long as he had, but this was something else entirely. This was a machine that had been waiting for him to slip up. What do you want from me? Barry asked again, trying to find any opening. Ross's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a tight, cold smile. We don't want anything from you, Barry. You've already given us everything we need. We just need you to stay put, while we clean up the rest of the mess you've made. The words hit like a slap. Barry had made plenty of enemies during his time in the service, but nothing that would warrant something like this. Ross wasn't just a federal agent or some underworld figure. He was part of something far deeper, something that could erase Barry from the face of the earth without anyone asking questions. Barry knew that the key to surviving this, to keeping his family safe, lay in understanding who was behind all this. If he could figure out who Ross was working for, maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tables. But that meant playing Ross's game. For now, at least. The silence in the room stretched as Barry stared at Ross, weighing his next move. The air felt thick with tension, as though the walls themselves were listening. I'm not going to sit here while you ruin my family, Barry said, his voice sharp with determination. I'll make you regret this. Ross chuckled, his expression never wavering. You've always been a man of action, Romo. But it's too late for that now. The game is over. You're already out of the picture. The door behind Barry opened with a loud creak, and two more agents stepped in, their faces expressionless. They didn't have to say a word. Barry could see the guns at their hips, the way they moved with the practiced ease of men who had killed without hesitation. They were here to make sure he didn't try anything foolish. But Barry wasn't about to give up. He wasn't the type to roll over, not when it came to his family. One of the agents stepped forward, locking eyes with Ross. We have the boys. They're secure, he said, his voice flat. Barry's stomach tightened at the mention of Noah and Liam. He hadn't seen them since they were hauled out of the house. He didn't know what was happening to them, where they were being taken, but he knew they were in danger. This was bigger than just an arrest. Ross turned to Barry, his smile widening. Your family is in good hands. But don't worry. We'll let you see them soon enough. That is, if you cooperate. Barry's chest tightened. He had to stay calm. He had to think. But the sight of those two agents, the knowledge that they were holding his sons, his mind raced with the fear and the rage of a man pushed to the brink. The door slammed shut again, and Barry was left alone in the cold, sterile room with Ross. For the first time since this nightmare began, a deep, gnawing fear gripped his chest. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for the people he loved. And he would do whatever it took to make sure they didn't become collateral damage in a war he never asked to be a part of. Barry's mind shifted into overdrive, calculating, planning. He had been trained for situations like this, had been taught to think 5 steps ahead. He knew how to escape, how to survive. But this was something more insidious. Something that couldn't be beaten with brute force alone. Where are they? He demanded again, his voice low and dangerous. Ross stood there, unblinking. Soon. All in good time, Romo. But Barry wasn't going to wait. Not anymore. He had to find a way to reach Laura, to reach his sons, before this twisted game went any further. Barry sat in the cold, gray room. The dim fluorescent lights flickering above him. He could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on him, suffocating every breath he took. His hands were shackled to the metal chair, the harsh steel biting into his skin, but that wasn't what hurt the most. No, the pain came from the realization that time was slipping through his fingers, and with it, his chance to protect his family. He could hear the muffled sounds of footsteps outside the door, agents patrolling, no doubt. But none of that mattered right now. All that mattered was finding a way out. He had been through hell before, but this was different. This time, his family was the one in the crosshairs. He had to get back to them. Before they were pulled further into the web that Ross had spun, the door creaked open, and Barry's gaze snapped to it, his body tensing instinctively. Ross stepped inside, his cold, calculating eyes locking with Barry's. The smile on Ross's face was thin, almost mocking. "Still holding on, Romo?" Ross asked, his voice a low drawl. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for. But let's be honest, your time is running out." Barry didn't flinch. His mind was racing. He knew Ross was trying to break him, trying to make him fold. But Barry wasn't that man anymore. He wasn't the soldier who followed orders without question. He wasn't the man who had been left in the shadows, doing dirty work for a government that didn't care. He was something else now. He was a father, and he would do anything to protect his family. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Barry said, his voice low but filled with quiet fury. "You think you have the upper hand. But you're wrong. You're making a huge mistake." Ross leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, as if he was savoring the moment. "You're a soldier, Romo. A broken, washed-up soldier who doesn't even realize how far he's fallen. You used to be part of something big, something important. But now," he shook his head, his smile widening, "now you're just a liability, an inconvenience. And we don't tolerate inconveniences." Barry's eyes narrowed. He had to remain calm, had to keep his focus. "You don't scare me," he muttered. "You should be worried about what happens next." Ross's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he recovered, his expression turning cold again. He took a step closer to Barry, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, do you? This isn't just about you. This is about erasing anything and anyone that stands in our way. You've seen too much, Romo. You know too much." Barry's heart clenched as he realized the depth of the trap he was caught in. Ross wasn't just after him. He was going after everyone, his family, his friends. Anyone who could stand in their way. It was a ruthless game, and Barry was the pawn in it. "I'm not going to beg you," Barry said, his voice steady. "But I'll make you a deal. Let my family go, and you can do whatever you want with me. You want to erase me? Fine. But not them. Not Laura. Not Noah. Not Liam." Ross chuckled, the sound chilling in the otherwise silent room. "Your family is already part of the plan, Romo. It's too late to save them. But you're still useful. You're going to help me clean up your mess. Help me make this all go away." Barry's blood boiled at the thought. He had been through hell in the military. But nothing could compare to the helplessness he felt now, his family in the hands of a man who was willing to burn everything to the ground for his own gain. "I won't do it," Barry said, his voice colder now. "You can't make me." Ross's eyes flashed with irritation. "You'll do what you're told. You're not in a position to make demands, Romo. The only choice you have is to cooperate. Help us, or watch your family suffer. It's that simple." Barry stared at him, his pulse pounding in his ears. He could feel his resolve hardening. There was no way he was going to let Ross have his way, no matter the cost. Just then, the door opened again, and another agent stepped inside, looking tense and nervous. He whispered something in Ross's ear, too quiet for Barry to hear, but the expression on Ross's face shifted. His smile faded, replaced by something darker. "Everything okay?" Ross asked, his tone sharp. The agent nodded, looking even more uncomfortable. "There's been a complication. The kids, they've started asking questions. They're not just sitting there quietly anymore." Barry's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't let them break. Not Noah. Not Liam. His mind raced as he thought of the worst possible scenario. What if they were already being used against him? What if they were being tortured, pressured to give up information? Ross's expression darkened further. "I don't want to hear any more problems," he snapped. "Handle it. Do whatever it takes." Barry's blood ran cold. He had to act fast. Every second that passed brought his family closer to the edge, and Ross was more dangerous than ever. If he didn't make a move now, it might be too late. As the agent left the room, Barry's mind was already calculating. He had no weapons, no way out. But he had something Ross didn't expect, a will to fight, a will to survive. He just needed one chance, one moment of weakness, and he would take it. Barry sat in the dim light of the interrogation room, his back against the cold metal chair, eyes steely and focused. Time was slipping through his fingers, but it didn't matter. His resolve had never been stronger. The threat against his family was the one thing that could break him, and it was the one thing that would keep him going. They thought they had him cornered. Thought they had him beaten, but Barry knew that when it came down to it, nothing could break a man more than the love he had for his family. Ross had underestimated him. Outside the room, the quiet hum of the air conditioner was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and Ross stepped in, his cold gaze landing on Barry. The smirk on his face was a familiar one, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something else there now, something far more dangerous. "You're not going to win, Romo," Ross said. His voice calm, but lethal. "You might be tough, but you're not invincible. And neither is your family." Barry's hands, still bound to the chair, clenched into fists. His heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through him. The thoughts of his wife, his kids, of everything that was at stake, kept him grounded, even when everything inside him screamed to escape. "I'm not interested in your threats, Ross," Barry replied, his voice low but unwavering. "What you don't get is that you're not in control. You never were." Ross leaned forward, the chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor. He locked eyes with Barry, his expression deadly serious. "You're already too deep in this, Romo. There's no way out. Your family is already part of this mess. They'll never be safe unless you do what I say." Barry shook his head, his jaw set. "You think this is just about me? You think I'm going to roll over and let you destroy everything I've worked for? You've made a huge mistake." Ross chuckled darkly, but there was no humor in it. "It's too late for speeches. You had your chance to walk away. Now, you either help us, or you watch your family fall. It's that simple." Barry's chest tightened as the implications of Ross's words sank in. He couldn't allow this to happen. Not now. Not ever. But he was running out of time, time to think, time to plan, and most importantly, time to act. Meanwhile, across town, Laura and the boys were held in a different facility, isolated, separated, and watched carefully. Every attempt they made to communicate or move was met with harsh resistance. But the fear that had initially gripped them was beginning to shift into something else, something stronger. They were fighting back, silently, in their own way. Liam, though too young to fully understand the danger they were in, had an instinct that told him something wasn't right. He clung to his mother as much as he could, sensing her anxiety but also her determination. Noah, on the other hand, was more aware of the gravity of the situation. He had seen enough in his short life to know when things were spiraling out of control. They weren't just sitting ducks in a holding cell anymore. They were waiting for an opportunity. Back at the interrogation room, Barry's mind was racing. He couldn't let them manipulate him. He needed to break free, to take control of the situation. His thoughts flashed back to his training, everything he had learned in the field, every escape, every ambush. He had the skills. He just needed the right moment. Ross stood up, pacing now, his hands clasped behind his back. "I've been patient with you, Romo. I've given you the opportunity to comply. But the more you resist, the more I'll have to make things difficult. And you wouldn't want that for your family." Barry remained silent, his focus unshakable. Inside, his heart was racing, his mind working furiously to find a way out. He couldn't wait much longer. He needed to create an opening, a distraction, anything that would give him the chance to break free. Ross stopped pacing and turned back to face Barry, his voice dripping with menace. "You think you can outsmart me? You think you're going to walk out of here with your family? It's over, Romo." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside the door. Both men froze. The sound was followed by the frantic clatter of footsteps, and then voices. Muffled but growing louder. Ross's face twisted in frustration. What the hell is going on? Barry's pulse quickened as he recognized the voice outside. It wasn't just any voice. It was his. His own voice, distorted but unmistakable. The commotion outside escalated, and Barry could hear shouting, angry voices, and the unmistakable sound of something being knocked over. "Who the hell is that?" Ross barked, his hand reaching for the door handle. But Barry's eyes never left him. This was it. This was his opening. "Isn't that your problem?" Barry said, a sly grin creeping across his face. You're too busy trying to control me. You've forgotten about everything else. Ross's eyes narrowed. He moved to the door, opening it just enough to peek outside. The instant his back was turned, Barry surged forward. Using every ounce of strength, he had to break the restraints holding him to the chair. With a sharp snap, the metal hinges of the chair gave way. He lunged forward, grabbing the officer's gun that had been carelessly placed on the table beside him. In a blur of motion, Barry was out of the chair, his training kicking in. He shoved Ross aside, knocking him into the wall, and sprinted for the door. There was no turning back now. As he burst into the hallway, chaos erupted. Agents scattered, shouting at each other, trying to make sense of the sudden violence. But Barry wasn't stopping. He was like a man possessed, his focus absolute. He wasn't going to be anyone's pawn anymore. Outside, in the yard, Laura's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the commotion, the sound of chaos spilling out of the building. She knew what that meant. Barry was coming. The sharp scent of burnt rubber lingered in the air as Barry's boots pounded against the pavement. He could hear the frantic shouts behind him, the echoes of chaos swirling in every direction. But his mind was clear. He had one goal now: get to his family. Nothing else mattered. The rage, the fear, all of it had coalesced into a singular, unstoppable force that propelled him forward. He didn't look back. Not for a second. The building behind him was swarming with agents, most still reeling from the surprise of Barry's escape. Some were scrambling for weapons. Others were shouting orders into radios. But Barry was already past them, his eyes fixed on the exit. The sound of helicopters grew louder overhead, but he didn't care. The noise only fueled his adrenaline. He had made it out once, and he wasn't going to be stopped now. As he neared the gate, a familiar figure appeared in the shadows, the officer who had been guarding the perimeter. His eyes widened in recognition just a moment too late. Barry moved like a blur, disarming the officer with brutal efficiency, knocking him unconscious before he could even raise a hand. He was out. The night air was thick, but it was freedom. Meanwhile, inside the building, Ross seethed with anger, his jaw clenched tightly. The plan had been going perfectly until Barry had made his move. Ross had underestimated him. He had underestimated the man's desperation, his will to survive, and most importantly, his unrelenting need to protect what was his. Ross slammed his fist against the table, eyes flashing with fury. Get him back. Now. Barry's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted through the alleyways, every muscle in his body working in overdrive. He was on borrowed time. The moment he left the compound, he had become a marked man. He knew that the agents would be coming for him, relentlessly. But he couldn't afford to think about that. His family was out there, and he couldn't lose them. His thoughts raced back to his wife, Laura, the woman who had stood by his side through it all. How many times had he come home covered in dirt, blood, bruises, only to find her waiting for him with that unwavering strength in her eyes? He remembered the mornings when they'd sit at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, the world outside seeming so far away. They had been through so much together, but now she was at the mercy of those who had no regard for the sanctity of family. For the first time in a long while, he felt something deep within him snap. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about righting the wrongs that had been done to them, about making sure that justice was served. His breath was shallow, his vision tunneling as he ran through the darkness, but he kept his focus. He knew exactly where they were holding Laura and the boys. He just had to get to them before it was too late. In the holding facility, the air was suffocating. Laura paced the small cell, her mind whirling with thoughts of Barry and their children. She could hear the sounds of agents moving through the building, their boots echoing off the cold concrete floors. But in the midst of the chaos, she felt something inside her shift, something she hadn't expected. The fear she had been holding on to for so long had been replaced by determination. She wasn't just going to wait for Barry to come and rescue her. She wasn't just going to be a victim. She had survived too much in life, and she knew that sometimes survival required more than just courage. It required action. Liam was sitting on the floor in front of her, his eyes wide with fear but trying to stay strong. Noah was beside her, his hand clutching hers tightly. They were all scared. None of them knew what was coming next, but there was something else there, too. The bond between them, the fierce love that bound them together, was stronger than any fear they might face. And that's when it happened. The sound of gunshots rang out, distant at first, but growing closer. The building seemed to tremble with each echo. The agents inside scrambled, their faces twisted in confusion. They hadn't been expecting this. And then, suddenly, the door to their cell was thrown open, and Barry stood there. Breathless but determined, his eyes locked on them. "Get up," he commanded, his voice hoarse but filled with urgency. "We're getting out of here." Laura didn't hesitate. She grabbed Noah's hand, pulling him to his feet, and then she scooped Liam into her arms. They were finally together again. The nightmare that had torn them apart was over, or at least, it was about to be. Barry quickly scanned the room, his mind already working out the next move. He could hear the sound of boots approaching from the hallway, the unmistakable thud of more agents coming their way. They didn't have much time. "We need to move now," Barry urged. He led them out of the cell, his eyes constantly darting between the shadows, every sense on high alert. There was no room for mistakes. No time to second-guess. The hallways were eerily quiet, the agents' shouts growing fainter as they got farther from their captors. Barry knew it wouldn't be long before they realized he had escaped, but he wasn't about to let that stop him. He could feel the weight of his family's safety on his shoulders. And nothing was going to get in his way. They made it to the back door, but it was locked. Barry didn't hesitate. With one swift motion, he kicked the door in, sending it crashing open. The night air hit them like a gust of freedom. Barry motioned for them to move quickly, and they did, racing across the darkened yard, towards the truck parked on the far side of the lot. As they neared the truck, the sound of more agents filled the air, but Barry didn't flinch. He was already at the driver's side, tearing open the door. The engine roared to life, the tires screeching as Barry slammed the pedal to the floor. They were out of the facility now, speeding through the night, the lights of the city flashing in the distance. But Barry knew this was just the beginning. They weren't safe yet. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, you felt like they might have a chance.